Hello and welcome to Digital Anthropos. I'm Adrian Balboacă and today I will talk to you about behind agile practices. There are so many agile practices that we have and we hear about them from trainers, from coaches, we can read about them in blog posts or articles or books, but quite often we don't know where they come from. So this is why today I want to explain some of the practices that we have, because I'm always puzzled about this question. Why do we need this practice? Where did it come from? What is its purpose? And so on. So quite often we just tend to have this idea that we just need to do it because someone told us. Some practices are useful in a context, but some other practices are not that useful in another context. So I hope that by explaining where these practices come from, you will understand more when to use and when not to use that specific practice. For me, all these ideas are just tools. So that means you can choose your tool depending on your context. It's very important to understand that Agile is not an outcome, it's just a journey towards something that's a lot more important. Your user, your business, your customer, your people, your overall well-being in this big world that we live in. So let's go a bit about what are these practices, and this is an older talk that you can see me do. The slides are older, but it's just that they're useful for this purpose now. First of all, cross-functional teams. Why do we need cross-functional teams? This is a drawing that I made. It's quite messy, I understand that, but the important part of this drawing is that while you had waterfall, you had these stages: analysis, development, testing, and deployment. Very simplified, it was waterfall by the book. But then what you have between analysis and development, between development and testing, between testing and deployment, it's just something that we call handoff. So we have an output that we give towards the next stage and they need to understand it. The problem with handoff is that it's extremely difficult to manage and it's always extremely costful. So you have a lot of cost of doing this handoff, and okay, sometimes it's not possible not to do handoff, but what I'd like to have is just the minimum amount of handoff and not that big at once, so not big chunks of handoffs. With waterfall you had a big chunks of handoffs because all the analysis theoretically was done and you'd pass it over towards the developers, and then all the development was done and you'd pass it over to the testers. Okay, I think nobody did that. Maybe in the beginning you still had some increments here and so on, but still this idea remained and you had big chunks of handoffs in between. So with cross-functional teams, what we do is we do this kind of handoffs, but they are very small. We want to do both, or not both, all of them: analysis, development, testing, and deployment in our cross-functional team, so everybody is involved. That means that when we do a bit of analysis, a bit of development, a bit of testing, everybody will see how this is done and we'll have this implicit knowledge about how things are. It doesn't matter that the analyst won't in fact hand off their knowledge towards the developers and the testers and the ops people and the business people and so on. This will happen, of course, but it will just be a small chunk that it's easy to digest. Also, it happens on the topic that we are all talking about now. And that's why it's very interesting to see how this type of handoff, where you have one focus topic, is easier to digest. So cross-functional teams are a very useful way to minimize this type of handoff. And if you have very big topics, like very big user stories or epics or tasks, or call them whatever, the amount of handoff will be bigger. So another very good reason of slicing your work into smaller chunks of work is that you'll minimize also the amount of handoff in between these people, and you'll have all these benefits of being faster time to market. Quite often the deployment part is out of this handoff. So what happens is that you don't have ops people, and you do these analysis dev tests inside the cross-functional team, but then the ops just don't know what happened, and they just receive a package to put it live or on a staging environment and so on. Again, that's not a good thing, because you'll have a very big handoff given away to the people from ops. So this is why DevOps appeared, because you'd like the ops being part of these cross-functional teams, and you like the ops people to understand what's going on from the beginning, from when you start thinking about that feature, when you start as a team to create this implicit knowledge that you have. And it is a very good thing to have ops from the beginning. And then maybe you have other roles like security people that sometimes just stay in the dark, and someone tells them, look, you need to make the review on this code or the review on these features, but it's just too late, and they have so much information to process. So again, too much handoff. It's very difficult in this complex world that we live in to have just a few handoffs, and the idea is just to make a small amount, but the amount to be meaningful for the work that you are doing now. Okay, what do we want to do as well is to have more communication face to face. That's very important. So that's why we have plannings, we have dailies, we have all sorts of meetings that help us to have this implicit knowledge being built up. We want less documentation of these handoffs. So we would like to have handoffs that are just useful for the time being, and as we learn about what we are doing, we'd like to have this knowledge being increased and documented as we find out what we need to do, rather than the other way, where the analyst becomes this person that knows everything, documents everything, and gives all this information to the teams. And again, the information will be very difficult to digest. So it's very important to have documentation built. It's good that we have documentation, but we'd like to have this documentation built as the team finds out what they need to do. So don't come with a lot of documentation up front. Try to build it incremental and iterative as we move along. And in this way, you'll have features done faster, meaning that at least time to market wise, you'll have a better response. Sometimes you'll work more because doing just one small part of it would be more difficult than doing everything at once. But on the other side, you'd like to have feedback from the market, so it's better quite often to have these features being put in production and then decide at the end if you want to add more, decide at the end if it's a good idea to add more to that initial slice of the feature. So it depends on what you want to optimize for. If you want to optimize for having feedback from the market, it's good to slice your stories. It's good to slice your features. if you want to optimize for delivering something that you know you need, but that quite often can be a rabbit hole, don't slice them, but it will be extremely difficult for the cross-functional teams to work because of those big chunks of handoff. Quite often cross-functional teams are difficult to have because you start with people that were used to doing just their job, their role, and then you say, okay, it's very good, you're a programmer, you're a tester, you're a security expert, you're an operations person or whatever, and now you need to talk to each other and you need to understand everybody else, you need to understand their concerns, you need to talk more, even though before you didn't talk that much with the others, but you just had documents or emails or so on. You need to understand what they need. You need to do all sorts of things like plannings and daily meetings that are horrendously repeating day after day. And then you also need sometimes to have the same human values. Maybe some people have more empathy, some have less empathy, some care more about their the well-being of the product, some are just there for the money. So all of these things start becoming a difficult thing. And when you start having this cross-functional team, it's important to understand that the team needs to grow as a whole, and quite often it happens that not everybody from the initial team will be part of that team after half a year or 1 year, because maybe they just don't get along. And you need to focus on other things with cross-functional teams than what you'd expect in a tech environment, like people, like empathy, like taking care of one another, being brave to say things that are not that pleasant, and also changing the communication style. You need to be a lot more assertive. Assertive means that you'd want to focus more on the facts and you'd like to be a good communicator. Typically these things aren't something we learn in school. These aren't things any company teaches us, so it's kind of difficult to have all these tools ready. That's why you need coaching, or you need someone from HR to take care of these, or some training on how to communicate and so on. So it's not that easy to have a cross-functional team. You have these benefits of minimizing handoffs. You have other benefits of being faster problem solver because everybody is there, and if you have a problem that needs a fast solution, you'd be able to have people quite there and it's easier. But you have all these people aspects that you need to take care of. Okay, something else. Rituals. We have this idea in Scrum especially, but also in extreme programming, sometimes in Lean they got imported, that we have these meetings. But let's go a bit into our rituals as a society. We have rituals like weddings, like baptisms, like funerals, like being lazy in a weekend, go out for a drink every Wednesday evening. So what do they have in common? The thing they have in common is that all the rituals have a purpose. And we need to understand what's the purpose of this specific ritual for our team. So if we talk about Scrum rituals, why do we have them? Are they helping us, or they're just annoying? Is the purpose appropriate for your context? You always need to ask this. You always need to ask yourself, did you choose the correct ritual? Does it happen in the moment when it should be? Do I have the right people for that specific ritual? The idea with rituals is that they start creating habits. So if you start with the wrong ritual in the beginning, you will start creating a wrong habit. The purpose of a daily meeting, let's say, would be that the team aligns and they understand together what are their challenges, how they can help each other so they can deliver things faster and nicer without that much friction and that many impediments. But if the daily is something that it's not made for the team, but it's made like a status meeting where the boss asks, what did you do yesterday? What will you do today? Then these rituals become something else, and they create the habit of the team that they need to report things, that they are not their own masters, that they are not that independent, and so on. So it's very important to see how rituals are applied, even though maybe the initial idea of that ritual was a good one. But after all, that ritual might be a bad thing. The same with planning, right? You have these plannings that take 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, even more than 1 day. I saw that. It's not a good ritual. Everybody hates to stay in a room for more than 1 hour and discuss anything. They just start thinking about anything else than the things that you should focus on. It's very difficult to focus more than 1 hour. So if you have that kind of meeting, something's wrong with it. And you'll create the habit that people can doze off, they can just relax, they can not be in the room while being present just physically. So these habits can be kind of difficult to unlearn after all. So what we'd like to do is to create good habits. Careful how you can do that. It's a constant discussion between whoever is involved in creating these new habits and the team or the teams or the group of people who will adhere to that. So don't start having meetings just because a guide says so, or a framework or a methodology says so. Start talking with the people that will be involved and ask them, is this helpful for you? How is it helpful? How can we improve it? If it's not helpful, let's just stop doing it or just do something else. And always start with a purpose. Like if I have a ritual of going out every Wednesday for a beer with my friends, probably my purpose is to socialize, relax, or maybe I just like beer. What's the purpose of a daily? What's the purpose of a retrospective? What's the purpose of a planning meeting? You always need to start with that. What is the purpose of whatever you are doing? And remind your teams or your colleagues about this. Always. Because this is where everything starts from the purpose. Now, sometimes you have bad habits that hinder performance. And these bad habits come from history, or they just come from these rituals that were implemented recently. You need to take those into account as well. You need to observe them. Bad habits, very often one, is when people are late for meetings. This is a bad habit. And if, let's say, 10 people, even though 10 people is huge for a meeting, but let's say for the sake of the easy computation that you have 10 people who are waiting for one person for 5 minutes that means that we lost 50 minutes of work. You can say, oh, it's just 5 minutes, but it's a lot. It's a lot for everyone. It's a huge cost for everyone to do that. And then it creates this idea that, oh, I can be late. So maybe next time that person will be late 5 minutes, but someone else will be late 7 minutes. Because, well, we're never starting on time. So that's a habit you start creating. Oh, we're never starting on time. This hinders the overall performance. And people who go there expect to have some result and then go back to work. Most people don't like to be in meetings all day. So think about that. Think about them and how you can solve this bad habit. And now we go to habits. Another interesting thing is that typically a habit results after doing the same thing maybe 20-30 days without stopping. You can have habits that you create yourself, you push yourself, like going to the gym every day. Maybe it's not something you do normally, but you understand that it's good for your health. Or you might have some other habits that you just created and you kind of like to get rid of, but it's difficult, like drinking too much coffee, eating too much junk food. But it's something that you fight yourself. So if you want to create a habit, think that it won't be just like that happening out at once. Let's say you want to implement Scrum with a new team and you have this daily meeting that in the beginning will be bad. And why it's bad? Because people are learning how to do that. It's a new thing for them. How much does it take for them to start understanding? Well, if you have a good context, maybe after 1 or 2 months they will learn it. Why 1 or 2 months? Well, let's say you have those 20 days. Those 20 days of work means roughly 30 days of calendar days. And maybe not everybody is so open to the new format or to this idea of talking daily. So then some people will start liking it and using it at once, but some others won't. So they need more convincing. They are laggards in this approach of accepting the new format. So if you want to create a new habit, think that it will take a while. People will always think why we're doing this, and if you convince them, or if they were already convinced, it will take a while until people will have this habit created. And you cannot push anyone to create a new habit. You can just show them that it's better for them. They need to get convinced that it's better for them. And yeah, after that things will go along. Think about that and think that you cannot change people. That's a difficult fact, maybe. Another thing that is a practice that we do in this modern way of working, like Agile and Lean and Kanban and Scrum, extreme programming, you have group decisions. You have more and more decisions that are taken by a group and not taken by a manager who just communicates the decision to the others. The problem with group decisions is that it's kind of more difficult to take a decision. So you need to understand how to solve problems in groups. You need to be a lot more efficient when trying to solve these situations. But why do we need group decisions? Again, going back to the practice. We moved on from a manager telling us what to do and taking the decision to having a group that takes that decision. What's changed? Why is this better? The problem with one person doing something is that they have this unintentional blindness. Whatever we do, we cannot do everything, we cannot understand everything. So we have spots where we are blind. So because we have these spots, it's important to understand them, to acknowledge that we are not perfect, and to ask for someone else to review whatever decision we want to do, or to review whatever new process that we want to implement. So this unintentional blindness affects everybody. It's just that you may want to recognize that you're affected by it or not. Good managers will never take a decision by themselves. They will always consult specialists, and I think the more people you consult, the better that idea will be in the end. So that's why we have group decisions compared to just one person taking a decision, because we want to solve this problem of unintentional blindness. Other type of decisions that we might take, or the types of reviews that we might have. We have code review. Why do we have that? What's the purpose of code review? It's the same thing. You have unintentional blindness. Okay, passing over the fact that sometimes maybe you have junior programmers or junior testers or junior ops people that don't know as much as a senior would know, so that it's necessary to have the review. But anyway, even in that case, you still have unintentional blindness. The person that did the work understands that they might slip something. They might have forgotten about something. So it's important to have another person looking at it, and sometimes a group of people looking at it, especially if it's a high risk situation. We have retrospectives or post-incident investigations, post-mortals, sometimes people call them. If you have these, it means that you already act as a group, and you want as a group to take the power of everybody and the knowledge of everybody so that you solve this problem of unintentional blindness. So you use everybody's knowledge, everybody's brain as much as possible. And another idea is the situation where you want to introduce new concepts, you want to learn new things. It's better to learn new things as a group, because you start questioning faster if this is useful. Is this new idea useful? Is this new idea useful in this situation or in that situation? So having a bigger group, you'll start understanding faster if it's a good idea to apply it or not. So group decisions are extremely powerful and help us by solving this unintentional blindness problem, but it can be extremely difficult to tackle it at times. The thing with group decisions is that we don't use so much information as we think we do. Quite often, or most of the time, we take decisions on partial information. And because we do that, our decisions are quite often not that good. Even though we think we know everything about the topic, well, as a matter of fact, we don't. And we know a lot less than we think we know. That's why if you have a group of people deciding, it's better. And these systems that that put us in this place of discussing together with other people these rituals that help individuals focus on better decision making are very useful. So that's why in a planning you'd have all the roles involved. You have a group decision that do we want to continue with this feature or not? Do we want to continue doing this or not? Because everybody can look at things from their own point of view, and it's a lot better like that because it's a lot less probable that we have unintentional blindness and we forget about some risks. We have this concept of the ladder of inference. How do we look at data? How do we tackle information? So what happens is that we have some pool of available data, the things that we know, the things that we observe, the things that we have taken in our head, and we select data from this. We basically filter data with our own knowledge and our own experience. Then we make some assumptions, and from these assumptions we take some conclusions that generate some beliefs, and those beliefs will generate some actions. This is a ladder of inference. What happens is that our beliefs from the past will affect the way we filter data for the future. So when we want to take a decision, that decision that we take now will be affected by the previous situations or experiences that we had in the past. The problem is that not always the situations in the past are related with the situation that we want to talk about or we want to think about now. So this reflexive loop that our beliefs affect what data we select next time can be a good or a bad thing. So if we take this decision to filter some data in a wrong way, it's better to have someone else near us and say, hey, doesn't have anything to do with this. It's just your bias. It's important to have these people around and to guide us, to make sure that the actions that we take are based on data that we filter, on assumptions that make sense for the context, and on beliefs that are heavily based on important data for that context. We have some hypes in today's world. Let's name just 3 of them that sometimes are a bit annoying to me: Agile, estimates, and scaling. So let's look at these. Agile. Why do we use this? Everybody wants a bit of Agile nowadays, and quite often when I ask them why, they don't know. It's just because it's a new shiny thing. It's a new thing that we just heard it's good. But almost nobody comes and says, look, we need this because we want to be a better company. We want to take care of our client in a different way, in a better way. The reason is that the world is faster than it used to be, and waterfall cannot work anymore. Well, it can work, but not that much, and just in a few places where the speed of time to market and the competition is not something very important, but the steadiness and the clarity of what you're doing, the security that you're doing exactly what you should do is important. And to be honest, there aren't a lot of places like that. If you look at all the software products that appear nowadays, many of them are not that critical, that they're not life critical, and even with life critical systems, you still can have part of them or most of that system done in an incremental and iterative approach, while yes, that part that is critical, you may want to tackle it in a different way and not in that constantly improvement loop that Agile brings you. But still, what happens is that the business wants features faster. This is all they need to know. This is everything they ask for. Time to market. So nobody has time for 2 years for waterfall projects anymore. This is what Agile came to, is the idea that we can deliver faster. Yes, it's true, but that means that you'll need to change radically your organization so that you can deliver faster. And it's not just about 2 teams that will stay there in their corner and do some daily stand-ups. It's about the whole organization helping everybody improve their way of working. It's about looking at continuous integration. It's about looking at improvements and how we have this internal idea, this internal wish to improve things continuously. It's about old systems that need repair and old procedures that need change. It's about trusting people more and having less of this control-based management. So it sounds good on paper, but in practice, Agile is hard. It's hard delivering every week or every 2 weeks because of all this old context, all this legacy that you have. And fixing everything at once, it's extremely expensive, especially for big companies. Now, you have this advantage that you have feedback loops. You will have feedback loops from your clients. You will know more what your clients need. But even like that, I see that big companies that after very big struggle start implementing this way of working, of incremental iterative approach. It happens that they don't take this end part of the feedback loop, meaning to ask your clients, hey, what do you think about this new feature? They don't use it because it's not in their culture, in their habits. So these habits need to be created, and someone typically from the outside needs to come and foster these new habits that will maybe get that organization into the 21st century. So when you come talking about Agile, please don't talk about Agile. Just talk about what you'd like to achieve. What's your purpose? What's your idea? What is your business growth idea in the next period? And then think about what tools to use. Maybe Agile is good for you. Maybe it's not. Maybe you need something else. But please don't come just to the idea that we want Agile because someone in Forbes magazine wrote about it. It's just not the way to do management, please. Okay, the next hype. Estimates. Everybody wants to have the best estimates. Why do you want to do that? Well, I strongly think that people don't really need estimates, but they need that confidence that things will get done. And they don't know any other way, other thing than just asking your team when will it be done. You don't have any other tools, because this is how we always used to make things, right? So asking for estimates is just a manager's way of trying to do risk management and trying to promise things that they know they can keep. It's a manager's way to look at the feature, to look at the budgets, to look at everything that's going on, and trying to put things in place, trying to put things in order. We like things to be put in order. We like to answer in small sentences when top management asks us, how do you spend this money and what will be our profits? But unfortunately, estimates are hard, especially in a complex environment. I'm not saying you cannot do that, but your estimations accuracy won't be that good. And the main reason is that we live in a complex environment and we cannot think about everything, every small thing that can affect my estimation. So then what you do, you estimate in intervals. So you say this is a minimum, this is a maximum, and probably you give a value somewhere out in between that interval. But again, that's not very efficient, because maybe you finish sooner and then you have that option to stay back and relax a bit. So if you want to really find out when something is done, start doing it. Start doing it and focus on splitting. Split the work in smaller batches as possible. Think about incremental development rather than thinking about how to estimate. Because estimation won't help you that much, especially in a very complex environment. If you come from a big corporate environment where you want to implement Agile or whatever you want to implement, where you need to estimate something just to please your managers. So try not to estimate, but just focus on splitting the work and doing it. In the beginning, maybe you won't be able even to split the work. Start working on it instead of having hours and hours spent on estimating. Take something that you know it's of value and work on it in the beginning. And then start working with a team, or bring someone from the outside that can work with the team to foster this incremental and iterative way of working. Seeing what we can do now that we can deliver fast, that can help us learn about the future work, and do that all over and over again. After a while, you will see that you will have batches of work, some that are a bit bigger, some that are a bit smaller. But you can put a number on that batch because you worked on it, you started on that part of a feature and you put it in production. And you know how much time it took because it is from the past. So maybe it took 10 days. So when someone else comes and says, I want to do this, you can relate to that batch that you had in the past. So you can start anchoring yourself in your recent past. That type of estimation where you anchor in your recent past is a lot more effective than just thinking about however the wind direction is and putting 300% on top just to be sure. You can estimate in hours, you can estimate in story points. There are all these ideas about estimation, but really the best way to estimate is not estimating, but just splitting the work. Okay, some people might argue that this is also a way to estimate. Okay, if you think like that, that's fine, but try it out. Don't put a number on it, but just try to make the smallest slice possible and then continue with it. And the last hype is scaling. I have many projects my systems are big. I have many team members. So we need to start thinking about scaling, right? Because we cannot have that. Just small teams, it just doesn't work. The problem with scaling is that it's just one way of managing complexity. And it doesn't always work. Because sometimes having smaller teams that just work on a vertical slice of features can be a lot more effective than having a lot of teams working together in a very complex way. Okay, I want to scale. Do I scale horizontally or vertically? So do I have vertical slices where I focus on value brought, or do I just scale horizontally on layers where I have the framework team, where I have the web team, the mobile team, and so on? It's a good question. It's not an easy answer because it depends a lot on the context. So I think scaling is a problem in today's world because people thought that they can apply Agile in very big corporate environment. Sometimes they can, sometimes they cannot really. So you cannot really scale that system where you have just 5-10 people and say, now I have 2000 and let's do the same. The level of complexity will be hugely different. And you will need some layers of management. All in all, it just won't work that great. So I think the real problem is asking yourself, how can I manage the complexity and minimize the accidental complexity? Meaning, how can I simplify this organization so that I don't need to scale that much? So that can I have, bigger teams, but not 2000 people teams, but 80 people teams that are divided into their own small teams. So this is a question, and if you want to learn more, there's a very nice video from Michael Feathers where he talks about the myth of scaling. So that was all for today. Thank you for watching, and I leave you with a question. What's your problem as a digital anthropos in today's digital world?